Now this is going to be an interesting video. See, this video is a response to some statements I've heard that I was making excuses for my criminal activity. And that was blaming it all on the officials and blaming some grand conspiracy. Now the person responsible for making this blame should also take note that for a while there before Mr. Elmore had it taken down, I'm sorry, YouTube user philelmore.com had it taken down. There was a video up here where a Amy Lilly from the Raleigh County Public Library, based on information given to her by Marshall Checkmate, aka PhilElmore.com, uh, attempted to threaten me with her, her friends in the police department and everywhere else. The funny thing about this is that basically shows a conspiracy for which said person involved themselves in. But they stated that, well, I was making excuses. Well, I'm going to point something out here. First of all, we're going to start talking about the evidence involved now. I'm not going to deny that I've ever taken part in criminal activity or that I've ever done anything against the law. I have. Problem is, I've never been caught actually doing the things that I've done, except for a few minor infractions. Um, uh, but that's it. Um, Stupid shit. But let me point something out to you. Okay, I pointed out, or I stated that there was a criminal conspiracy involving Mary Kay Jennings. Um, I'm sorry, Mary Ann Jennings. She's magistrate in Raleigh County, the head magistrate. I also pointed out that there's a corrupt FBI agent in the local field office here by the name of Michael Hayden. He is the senior FBI agent in the field office. Now, I should point out that the building next to the building I was going to use for my martial arts school burned down. My lawyer actually got that building the day before. It burned down and destroyed much of the evidence I had. Coincidental. That the people who were investigating the burning down included the state police, the sheriff's department, the Beckley police. Oh, and let's not forget the FBI, who used surveillance camera footage from the federal courthouse. That the state annex was across the street from it. The courthouse, the Raleigh County courthouse, was like right up the road, actually across the road, because it set at like a turn. And right here's the new annex. Over here's the federal building. Over here is the courthouse, prosecutor's office, police department are back this way. So it sits right in the middle of all this, and yet it magically burned down. No one can tell what caused the fire. They don't know. They think it was gas leaks or heaters or a number of different things. And when you're talking about the senior FBI agent being the person investigating, who would be a corrupt person, a criminal in office, it kind of seems rather interesting, especially after the day after my attorney moved there. God knows why. Uh, and I had made a comment when I had been given this information from my attorney's secretary, that was rather convenient for everything to be gone. Well, I wasn't blaming her. I was just stating it was rather convenient for my evidence to all go poof up in flames. She became very adamant about, are you blaming us? Don't be blaming us. Well, you know what happens? You know what they say about what happens when someone steals something and you say you have something missing, and the first guy to stand up saying, I didn't take it, and they're really adamant about saying they didn't take it, are usually the guys who took it. Yeah. Um, well, here's the interesting thing about it. I talked about how there was this whole corrupt thing going on. Well, I'm going to explain something here. Um, to begin with, uh, well, to begin with, here is a copy of the assault on a police officer that I was charged. It was dismissed due to insufficient warrant, which meant there was no probable cause to begin with, and that the issuing magistrate, being Magistrate Jones, um, was therefore negligent in his duties. Furthermore, the statement coming from a Trooper Duckworth, filled out on a magistrate court criminal complaint form, uh, essentially Well, here I'll skip to the part because this was actually written for three separate charges, all in the same form, uh, in which he gives a date on Thursday for 2006 at approximately 13 hours. The undersigned officer received a public service from Mike Yancek, who was an agent for the FBI assigned to the Beckley office. Agent Yancek advised that he had a conversation with Ronald Collins Jr., in which Mr. Collins was wanting to file a complaint against the undersigned officer. Mr. Collins became upset that the information obtained was not in his favor, at which time he advised Yancek that he was going to kill the undersigned officer. Now, that was dismissed due to a whole issue with the code and a great deal of other stuff. But in fact, this and another charge that was brought with it was dismissed. But this was when they brought the whole contributing delinquency of a minor thing with Ashley Redden. Now, I should point out that, well, first of all, whenever you're filing a complaint on someone to an investigative authority, the only thing they do is take the complaint and examine the evidence stated in the complaint. If you say someone threatened you with a knife, but there was no knife, well, then there's an issue with your complaint. Since this was all taken over the phone and I was talking about violations of West Virginia Code, specifically the fact that the statements of both Ashley Redden and Leah Kirk were written on plain white copy paper in violation of the West Virginia laws or rules of criminal procedure. I was told by Agent Gansik that he was going to investigate. When I inquired why, it was because him and Trooper Duckworth were buddies, and that he wasn't going to do anything. When I said I was going to his superior, he decided to threaten my life, my mother's life, and everything else. I kind of held on to this little bit of information over this time. Because it took me 6 years to re-infiltrate this organization from different areas in which, yes, I did commit various criminal acts, but I've never gotten caught at it. Amazing like that. And managed to track this guy down. It took me 20 minutes to track him down. This was some help through some connections of mine. It's known that I work with members who are former CIA operatives. Frank Dukes and Grandmaster Rashida Kim of the Black Dragon Flying Society. But it was none of their connections or assets or anything else that had anything to do with this. All this was on my own. So I tracked this guy down. His name is Agent Michael Hayden. He is the senior FBI agent in the Southern West Virginia field office. He actually lives in Princeton, Virginia, but he operates out of the Princeton, Beckley, and Charleston offices for the FBI in the federal courthouses in all three areas. Now, I should point out that had I actually made a threat like this to an FBI agent, then said FBI agent would have a recording of this. He doesn't. But it's okay. Copies of this have been sent out. Oh, here's a interesting point to this. This was filed the interesting part to this that pursuant to Rule 4, the warrant shall describe the offense charged in the complaint. That the complaint mentions a threat allegedly made over the phone to an FBI agent, not directed at the FBI agent but another officer. That the FBI agent at a later unknown time relayed the alleged threat to the officer that the threat was allegedly directed at. The warrant issued in the case number 06M1587 for the charge of assault on a police officer, in which the criminal complaint makes no mention of an attempt by the defendant to commit a violent injury to a police officer. Neither does it mention any set of facts that would show defendant unlawfully committed act placing the officer in reasonable apprehension of immediately receiving bodily harm. This complaint does not support the charge of assault on a police officer. As pursuant to West Virginia Code 61-2-10B, subsection D. Already done other stuff here. Oh yeah, get a load of this. When they arrested me, apparently the defendant's counsel was not notified of the defendant's arrest. The arresting officer was aware the defendant was represented by counsel. The defendant's arrest was in violation of and contrary to the defendant's right to have counsel present during interrogation. At no time in the future will the facts and evidence support a charge of assault on a police officer. Amendment to the complaint will prejudice the defendant, therefore the case shall be dismissed with prejudice, which basically means that there was no proof of this, but I was arrested without proof, which actually places Magistrate Jones in as being criminally irresponsible of just rubber stamping stuff that came through. Interesting little portion there. Oh, another little interesting fact in this is I had 2 computers taken on a terrorist search warrant because of my uncle, Thomas C. Keller, having made a having made a claim that I had threatened to blow up the entire city of Beckley. I don't think anyone can do that with an atomic weapon. I don't know. You have to ask the people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki on that one. But here's an interesting point. I actually filed a motion with the West Virginia State Police concerning the whole situation. Pointed out that my uncle had been caught downloading child pornography onto my computer. That there was an argument made between my uncle and his girlfriend Karen Carlock, who claims to be an informant for Trooper Duckworth, and that Miss Carlock, in fact, interestingly enough, that my uncle and Miss Carlock claimed that I was going to blow up the entire city of Beckley and all this terror stuff just to get the evidence covered up. The evidence being a micro SD card on my BlackBerry Curve. Now, if you look at the BlackBerry Curve, the way it's designed, you actually have to take the back cover off, take the battery out, then take the micro SD card out. At the time of all this, I kept the micro SD card in the BlackBerry due to the fact that, the screen was damaged on it and I didn't want to lose it, so I just left it in the BlackBerry. It's not ever mentioned on the search warrant when they took it. And that right there is a key piece of exculpatory evidence, which if they don't turn up, or if there's no copies of this from when the crime lab had done their research, then it's going to look criminally negligent. Add to that Miss McClure, the head of the State Police Crime Lab, is also married to a Sam McClure, a Beckley detective who charged me with malicious wounding, which was later dropped due to lack of evidence. Noticing a pattern of police harassment here. Well, if you'll notice, my statement was signed and notarized on March 11th. The computers were taken February of 2011. So, yeah, here we are discussing a nice little bit of continuous harassment, and here's these familial ties, which apparently Lieutenant Deeds of the Beckley State Police Detachment, who works for the Professional Standards Bureau under Captain White, seems to be refuting, doesn't want to address. Oh, and here's the other more important issue. Right here is both statements from Leah Kirk and Ashley Redden. Now, it should be pointed out that the statements were written by Trooper Gregory Duckworth on plain white sheets of copy paper. See, they were actually filled out by Trooper Duckworth. In one case right here, it says that I have read the statement. This statement, Sergeant Duckworth has reviewed it with me, and I find it to be true to the best of my knowledge. Well, gee, why didn't you write your own statement? But anyway, we come into this too as well with, I have read this statement. Sergeant Duckworth has reviewed it with me, and I find it to be true to the best of my knowledge. But he wrote the statement, and he didn't even fill them out on a proper police form. He wrote them on plain white sheets of copy paper. Now, the interesting thing about this that I'm going to point out is that, this is a clear violation of the West Virginia Rules of Criminal Procedure, specifically Rule 27, proof of official record, in which it cites that the proof of official record shall refer to the rules of civil procedure. In this case, Rule 44, what is it? Paragraph A, subsection 1. An official record kept within the United States, any state, district, commonwealth, or within a territory subject to the administrative or jurisdictional jurisdiction of the United States, or an entity therein, the state of West Virginia, for example, when admissible for any purpose, such as a statement by the police, may be evidenced by an official publication thereof. There's another definition for it. There's a bunch of ors, but we'll skip that because it doesn't matter. The certificate may be made by a judge of a court of record of the district or political subdivision in which the record is kept, authenticated by the seal of the court, or, the relevant point, may be made by any public officer, such as a police officer, having a seal of office, such as on an official form, and having official duties in the district or political subdivision of which the record is kept, authenticated by a seal of the officer's office, such as an official form. Now, you have to ask why this person went through all the trouble of not putting it on an official form. Now, I've worked for the government. Usually we keep copies of official forms in PDF format on computers at our workstation. So that way when you need a form, you can at least print it off the printer, go run some copies of it, and you have several copies of this official form. Instead, what we have here is plain white sheets of copy paper with writing. Now, this is an important issue only so much in the fact that the officer was attempting to avoid official channels. Because if he would have filled it out on a copy of the a police form, he'd also have to fill it out with a copy of the criminal complaint form, and all these different things involving all these different signatures and everything else. From my understanding of talking to Ashley Redden when I got off house arrest for this whole thing, that there would have been other copies of the form. It would have been in the database and the system and everything else. In fact, I'm willing to bet if Lieutenant Deeds were to try to look up these documents, he wouldn't find them. They would be missing or gone or something of that format. Oh, God, you just have to love this. Because right there you have the officer violating rules of criminal procedure. These gross statements couldn't be accepted because, well, for one, they're not done officially. They were written by Trooper Duckworth. They could have been easily signed under duress. A weird thing, Ashley Redden's statement has her signature and her mother's signature, and they do appear to be somewhat different in the way they're formed. Leah Kirk's statement only has her statement, which again wouldn't be official because her being a minor at the time, she'd have to have her parents' signature as well. So what we have here is someone essentially most likely wrote this out ahead of time in accordance with said general conspiracy, and then well, I don't know how to explain it. Yeah, this would essentially constitute, God, I don't know. Well, it doesn't exactly show conspiracy, but it does show unprofessional police work. And then when you go into the whole issues of all these people involved. And what makes it even more astounding and more beautiful when you add to that is the fact that Ashley Redden stated as a court of record before Judge Hutchison that that she was coerced by her mother, the officer, and the prosecutor. That wasn't her exact terms, but that's essentially the roundabout of it. So what we come to here is this response with evidence. Evidence now. Paperwork. Which essentially says that there seems to be a considerable issue involved in this. Um, Furthermore, and I don't have a copy of this with me, but actually, no, wait, yeah, I do. Um, as you can tell, now remember how I mentioned in my whole little interview about the Bredens and the Lilies and the Kirks all being intermarried and such. Bear in mind that Chris Leffler wished to have these additional charges transferred to Mary Jennings. It was his motion to have it transferred to Mary Jennings. And the fact of the matter is that if Miss Jennings understood that she uh, was, and this comes from that whole thing with the police, it's a harassing phone calls charge, and I was found not guilty of it as well. Um, But as it turns out, that if she knew that she had familial ties to these people, that if she knew that the officer had familial ties to uh, the alleged victim, then wouldn't that be grounds for recusal because she wouldn't want to be accused of biasness? Instead, she didn't. So I'm going to accuse her of being biased. In fact, I'm going to take this 3 steps further. I'm going to consider it criminal conspiracy, a blatant disregard for the law and abuse of power. Well, you know what they say, power is power. And right there, she has the power, except for the fact that she has to keep these things a secret. When she can't keep them a secret, well, her power gets diminished. As well as all those caught in this conspiracy, members of the Beckley Police Department, state police, federal authorities, you name it. Now, I'm putting all this on the internet because here soon I'm going to send a copy of all of it out to the hmm, FBI headquarters in D.C. Um, the fact that Booth Goodwin of the U.S. Attorney's Office has a copy of the statement which I sent to the Western Forensic Lab, um, which for my talking to Lieutenant Deeds, he didn't have a copy of, and he wasn't even aware it existed, which goes back to the whole Serenia McClure being married to Sam McClure, who's guilty of uh, charging me under a felony with later dismissed due to lack of evidence. Um, Essentially equates the fact that, um, criminal conspiracy. In fact, Mary Jennings actually was the magistrate before which my initial appearance was ran, and she found probable cause. Um, but there was no evidence to verify the probable cause. That being that the person I struck in the head with a hammer claimed, who broke into my house, no doubt, claimed that we had been drinking together and everything else, but there was no police reports, no breathalyzers given. Um, and in fact, when the police showed up, he was the only one who was intoxicated. But because he claimed that we were doing drugs on the spot while I was on house arrest, um, for this made up bullshit, as a matter of fact, she found probable cause, which again goes to reinforce that criminal conspiracy of harassment and everything else by these certain groups of people because they're trying to cover for their own criminal wrongdoing. I put the evidence out. So if the people who would care to, I don't know, dispute it, like to put up some evidence, please, by all means, do so. But right now we have officers violating rules of procedure, what looks like potentially falsified evidence, multiple cases of harassment. It keeps going back to the same people involved. Makes you wonder.